welcome to another episode of Formula One Philosophy. This is number 9 for us. We're already about to be 4 weeks into the season with, as Sean correctly said last week, an entire season left. So it'll be interesting to see what happens from this point forward. Basically, it's a fresh start for everybody if you look at it that way, and that's how a lot of people should and need to look at it. We're looking at you, Daniel Ricciardo. Anyways, as always, F1_philosophy at Instagram, F1 Philosophy at YouTube, and anywhere else you find your podcasts. F1philosophypod at gmail.com to join the fantasy league. Somebody has to take Gatsby down his peg. Or me, either one. We're very hateable people, me and Gatsby, so. Right, Gatsby?
Hello?
Yeah.
What's going on?
God damn it. You're late on last week's podcast, and this is how you respond to us?
Right!
I don't know, man. Listen, maybe you're not going to be a good producer, but maybe you can help me out with my...
Oh, I'm sorry.
God damn it, Gatsby. I have a cat problem in my house. Maybe you can take care of it, Gatsby?
No! My goodness!
Gatsby, this wouldn't be the first time you and I have had to bury a body, okay? We won't get into this podcast, but...
No!
Don't deny it now. Anyways, Sean, how you doing this week?
After that, I'm better.
Having a tough time? Aren't we all?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Life's hard.
It can be. A wise customer of mine once told me, I used to say, I can't complain whenever they asked me how I was doing. And he said, looked me in the eye and he said, and who wants to hear you complain? Very wise words.
Yeah. I used to have a habit of answering not too bad when people asked me how it's going, without realizing what that actually meant, until one of my former bosses looked at me and said, you have to be more positive or you're going to die really fucking young.
Was it the boss I'm thinking of? The one in the Hillbilly Land?
No.
Yeah, okay.
He was an older Polish gentleman.
Oh, wow. Huh. Would have never guessed that. That's not to say that Polish people can't be good engineers. I just, you don't...
They're great engineers, actually.
Yeah, I'm just saying I've never heard that about that boss. Anyways, do you have any corrections from last week?
Just one minor one. We talked about Sauber last week being on the grid for however long and not being able to make a wheel nut that worked. I did find out more about Sauber. They first started in 1993 as a completely new team. They were supposed to be Mercedes' factory team, but last minute Mercedes got cold feet and backed out and left Peter Sauber on his own.
Wow. That's, considering, that's pretty good.
And they have been on the grid ever since without interruption.
Yeah. Well, name changed and they became more like, I think, symbiotic with like Red Bull Sauber for a bit and Sauber Ferrari, stuff like that.
Yeah, and Peter Sauber has always been involved even when they've sold to different units like BMW and Audi and whatnot. And the fact that they've sold to an investment firm since 2012 or 2012, I believe. Peter Sauber's still involved, so it's impressive in the fact that he's been able to do that much with the team, really not being anybody.
Yeah. Because what do they're Swiss, right? If I'm not mistaken.
He's Swiss, yes.
Well, I guess that means he has access to a lot of like banking, so for financing, right?
From what it sounds like, he was just a really good people person.
Yeah.
He started building race cars. Sauber first went sports car racing. Established a relationship with Mercedes that way, and then took it on and on and on, and ended up as high as you can get in the chain. But considering they've always kind of been around the back, with some exceptions when BMW came in and a couple of years here and there, they show what can be done with little money, per se.
Yeah. For all the fanfare Jordan gives himself, he could learn a thing or two from Sauber. Considering Sauber lasted 30 some odd years, he lasted, I think, I want to say maybe 18, maybe like 15 to 20 years around there.
Something like that, yeah. So,
I have a correction. I said Damon Hill last week only won one race with Schumacher on the grid. He actually won two. He won Canada and this is 94, Canada and Japan. I thought it was just Japan. It was also Canada. And yeah, I'm going to release a rant on Hill eventually. But I think he needs to give up the ghost on 94. Like, enough's enough. Still talks about it. Anyways, yeah, I actually don't have any stories from the restaurant. No physical laws, nothing. This week was actually a quiet week. I think it's because it was Easter, right? So
yeah, probably.
we all took a break. Yeah. So you know what? Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Oh, one more thing, actually. Unibrew, for the love of God, please sponsor us. I'm drinking Fin du Monde right now. Sean's drinking Trois Pistels. We're having a grand old time. It's what I look forward to on Wednesdays. Let us show you what we can do for your company.
Either that, or we're going to have to take up brewing on our own and show you what it actually means.
Mm-hmm. I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but I'll just say this. Sean makes a mean stout. Is this stout? No, it was a porter you made that was spectacular. You make a spectacular porter. I love me some porters, especially November to about right around now. I like my dark beer from this point in time.
So basic bitch season.
Oh, shut up. Instead of hot chocolate, right? Instead of snuggling over an open fire with a blanket, I want my porter or my stout. Yeah, it is basic bitchy.
A little bit.
What does Gatsby think of that?
Fantastic development this is.
What is that? God. You will be the death of me. Okay. Let's get into it. Race number 4. Japan, Suzuka. Early, you and I talked about it preseason, how this might be a little bit different of a Grand Prix. Because different weather, a little bit colder. Brings about maybe a different strategy. Probably a lot of rain still, even though it's not in October. Because I think that part of Japan, they only have wet and dry season, right? I don't think they have 4 seasons.
Oh, they do.
Oh, they do? Oh.
Their weather is very similar to ours.
Oh, interesting.
But it is a lot more damp because they're a tiny island or a tiny series of islands in the Pacific Ocean.
Okay. I guess I'm thinking more like Taipei and stuff like that. Because I'm thinking the...
well, it's Taiwan.
You're right. We are a one China podcast here. No, I was just looking at that earthquake that happened. I thought briefly, and seeing Taipei or Taiwan on the map. Oops. I thought, oh, that looks like a tropical part of the world climate, and maybe Japan is kind of similar, but I was wrong. But because of that earthquake, I was wondering maybe if there's any type of flooding or tsunami, it might cancel the Grand Prix like they did at Imola last year.
No. There is a tsunami warning for Taiwan, but it's going to affect that area. That just reminded me, though, that earthquake's going to fuck up work for me.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because most of the world's semiconductors come out of Taiwan, so every time they get hit by something, it hits us.
And you literally get hit at work? You can tell us, Sean.
Quite possibly.
I'm going to get a doll, and you're going to point on the doll where they touch you. All right. Anyways, Japan. Always a fun race. Max Verstappen, winner the last 2 years, and won one championship there.
Very awkwardly, too.
Yeah.
Nobody was sure that he actually won, and then they put him in a big armchair. It was very cringeworthy.
Yeah, I remember Button going up to him being like world champion, and Max was like, excuse me?
Yeah.
But yeah, so obviously he's not winning the championship here, theoretically speaking. But every part of me thinks 10 in a row is coming out of him from this point forward, but possibly even 11. And there's nothing in the past to say it won't be dominated by Red Bull. So I'm going to spoil my predictions right now. I'm just going to say he's definitely my P1. We're going to talk out the rest of it. But I'm pretty positive he finishes first this week. So
yeah. I just want to say I have the weather forecast for Japan Open. It is supposed to rain on Friday. Saturday and Sunday are overcast, but the real thing here is the temperature. It is going to be 18 degrees on Sunday.
So a little bit colder than normal. Although that sounds to me like perfect weather, if you think about it. For the drivers, at least.
For the drivers, yeah, sure. Most of the races we do, like 20 degrees, 22 degrees is considered cold.
Okay. So it's going to be a Las Vegas-like Grand Prix. So that means Lando Norris is going to spin out in the second lap. So I was going to put him high up on my predictions, but thanks for letting me know that. Yeah. So cold and rainy. Well, this is what we predicted preseason. It would be around this time, so it tracks with what we thought. Are you looking out for anything in particular this week besides the weather?
No, I think it's too early in the season to really have any storylines going into it. The weather's going to be a big thing. Obviously, when it's at the end of the season or closer to the end of the season, you do get some weather like this, so this won't be unusual weather for Japan. But it will be cold. It will be damp. So, I mean, I think we're in for a typical Japanese race, which is never a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's always a pretty decent race.
Yeah, it's one of the best circuits. You and I talked about it preseason too. Like, if they're going to bring in another part of Japan, I hope they can still keep this somehow, because
it has to stay.
It's just such a beautiful track. Elevation, everything, crisscross. Like some of the most famous, I guess, left-handers, the one that Alonso went around Schumacher at 160R. It's just one of the best courses ever. And it's the main one, I think, like you said, for Super Formula, right? They race at Suzuka for the most part there.
They race twice at Suzuka per year, but that's not the only one they race twice at. So, but it is the season opener, and I believe they finished the season at Suzuka as well.
And they always, like, up until I think about 2000 or 2001, it was always the last or the second last race. How many titles have been decided at Japan? It's insane. I think I watched a video by Formula1.com, was 13 different times, that at least in recent memory. Mm-hmm. And Hakkinen and Schumacher went back and forth, and all those years it was always decided at Suzuka. It's just a lot of great memories, a lot of great emotion. And like you said, with changes of weather, it's always very, like, interesting. And yeah.
And it's also the only, or one of the only, tracks on the calendar that has remained unchanged.
Interesting.
So no layout changes to the track itself. They've adjusted runoff areas and they've put tarmac where there was gravel and things like that, but no actual layout changes to the track in its history.
That's amazing, considering, well, I guess Spa they had to from 1950, because it used to be in the town of Belgium.
It used to be a public road.
Yes, that's what I mean. But I think ever since they made it Spa-Francorchamps, the actual circuit hasn't really changed that much, has it?
There have been some changes. There was some construction there a while ago. I know Eau Rouge has had some tweaks. It's still very much the same, but they've tweaked it here and there.
But anyways, that makes Suzuka even more special. That never been touched once. Actually, have they changed? I guess they have changed Melbourne a few times. I was there actually when they were doing it, but for the most part, like the layout's still pretty.
They changed it as recently as 22.
No,
they took out a chicane.
That's probably why I don't recognize it last week. At times, I was always say, like, no, that's turn 14. You're like, no, that sounds like turn 13 or 6 or something. And I was like, what are you talking about? Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Let me start with one of my comments. I keep forgetting to talk about this every week. And it comes out true for the most part. Last week, it didn't happen because Logan Sargent was out. But what I've noticed is a trend, and you saw it in the first two races, and it would have been in the third race, if not for Logan being out. But every week, I think Q1 in qualifying is going to be the two Saubers, the two Alpines, and Logan Sargent from this point forward.
I think Danny Rick has something to say.
Well, track limits last week, otherwise he wouldn't have been. And I think it would have been completely different if Logan wasn't out. Like, Logan would have been rock bottom. And then it would have been a little bit different to navigate for him. But you're right. Yeah, he's not having a good time right now. He could be the one of the two drivers, I think, that can sneak his way out of Q1. Who else could be? I don't know. Maybe an Albon every now and then if Albon has another accident. But I'm pretty sure that's a lock for Q1 every week, though. If Danny Rick behaves himself. 2 Saubers, 2 Alpines, and Logan.
There's still plenty of time for Stroll to hit the bottom.
Yes. I don't know. I still got faith in him. He had a solid race last week. Or 2 weeks ago. I still got a little bit of faith. Point I'm trying to make is Sauber, as much as we talked about them, we're impressed with how they've been on the grid for 31 years. There's no end in sight for their bottom right now, is there? And it's if you can't figure out a pit stop and you're not that fast to begin with, and your drivers are just kind of phoning it in, it's not. They might finish the season on 0 points at this point.
They might, which wouldn't be the first time for them. But have you been following what the latest rumors are saying?
For driver market or for Audi's clusterfuck?
Mainly driver market related to Audi.
Well, I remember you telling me a couple months ago Esteban Ocon to Audi. I'm assuming that's not a thing anymore. What is it then?
That's not the rumor mill. It's always been Sainz. There's always been a rumor that Sainz is tied to that team, and that's, I'm assuming, because Carlos Sainz Sr. races for Audi.
Mm-hmm.
And this week what they're saying is that there is a deadline on Sainz to sign the contract. So that would imply that there's a contract with Sainz already that he's been sitting on, and they're giving him a deadline to accept or not accept.
Wow.
I don't know that that's true. F1 media likes to just throw shit out there and see if it happens.
Yeah.
But the other thing tied to that was allegedly Hulkenberg has signed with Audi as well.
Interesting. I guess he sees the writing on the wall with Haas, and they don't exactly. I think, like I told you when they fired Steiner, I don't think Komatsu keeps either of them. And we talked about it a bit last week where I said it finally makes sense to keep these two drivers, but I think they're going to, at some level, offload at least Magnussen, but I think both. But that's a lateral move for Hulkenberg, who's been complaining about cars for the past season and a half.
It is a lateral move, but I think he's going for the Robert Kubica move. Not that Kubica's a bad driver, don't get me wrong. He seems to be phenomenal in his prime. But Kubica went to Sauber when it was BMW and shot to the top, right? And I think this Audi takeover has people thinking it's another one of those situations where the big German manufacturer is going to come in and absolutely dominate. Mercedes, BMW, Audi. I don't know. I don't see it happening.
No.
At least not right away, especially not with Hulkenberg. Maybe with Sainz.
You and I have talked out Sainz pretty nicely with him going to a bad team. We talked about last week where he's in a win-win situation if he goes to a bad team, where he can say, look at my resume, I'm pretty good. If he goes to Haas or Sauber, he can say, that's the car. I have a shit car. Give me another chance. Mm-hmm. But if he overachieves, then you're right. He looks like a god.
Yeah.
But you bring up Mercedes, shocked the world. It was Braun that shocked the world. And then once everybody caught up, it took him, as Jordan has said this on his podcast before, 5 years until they were champions.
Yeah, but then it was 5 years on top.
I agree. Yeah, and I can see 5 years down the road Audi being competitive, very competitive, even the title contender. It's just I'm saying, if Sainz thinks it's going to happen or Hulkenberg thinks it's going to happen when they get there, I think they're going to be greatly mistaken. As Valtteri Bottas, how a team that seems to be trending in the right direction, Alfa Romeo, I think they finished 6th the year before he got there, and then finished 6th again. How did that work out for him? If you're not the right type of driver to develop a car, and there's no proof that Hulkenberg is, there's some proof that Sainz is. That's a bad idea.
So that's the next thing, right? So we're talking about Sainz potentially already having an Audi contract that he's sitting on. Hulkenberg allegedly signing a contract for Audi that nobody's confirmed yet. And what happens to Valtteri and Zhou? Because this is Audi, right? This isn't Sauber. This is Audi that wants these drivers. Allegedly, Valtteri and Zhou are gone at the end of this year.
Listen, I'm happy to hear this. I just want to know, for one thing, before I start celebrating, where was this report made?
It's all the normal places. It starts with some random Italian journalist, and then it spreads to GP blog and where everybody else that picks up this nonsense. So that's why I caution this is all unconfirmed, but that is the rumor mill at the moment. Take that as you will.
Yeah, I don't trust the blogs in this sport because, like you said, there's a lot of insertion. I think a lot of the big players in Formula One, they use these blogs to insert stories that they want to be circulated.
Absolutely, and you get driver managers and everybody else creating scenarios, right? Like we saw Flavio and Alonso and Toto having coffee in Monaco. For all we know, they could have run into each other and decided to have a coffee. But of course, Flavio takes that as an opportunity to insinuate that they're talking about Fernando to Mercedes.
Yeah. And you and I don't really want to talk about it just yet or even today. But what a bad idea that would be if Mercedes did that, just for the record. Anyways, that being said, if Hulkenberg signed, I think he sees the writing on the wall at Haas, but if Valtteri is gone, doesn't make complete nonsense. Like, it's not complete unlogical for him to go to Haas, like a straight swap. You know, like it's still in the Ferrari era. He's started at Ferrari with not started like his career, but started his Alfa Romeo journey with Ferrari engines. He's kind of familiar with fighting at the back, fighting for a few points here and there.
Yeah, but he's also spent a lot of time with Mercedes engines and knows what it's like at the front.
I agree, but I don't think that's his career anymore.
No, yeah, you're right. But just because he's checked out doesn't mean he doesn't want the opportunity to be higher. So, I don't know. We'll see. We've never talked about him to Red Bull, but I mean, if they're in a pinch and they don't have a driver, it's not a bad option, but they're definitely not in a pinch. They will have somebody.
He is, and that's just to help you with that point, he is the perfect number 2 driver. He knows how to play the team game. He knows when to shut up. He knows how to win when he needs to win. Sometimes, actually. Monza 2021 was, I think, when they decided to go with George Russell, when he needed to catch the McLarens and had just no bite in him. So, yeah, maybe feisty Valtteri is done, and Toto realized that. If he ever was feisty, or maybe they broke his spine, maybe it's a Charles Leclerc type of thing.
Well, you probably don't recall, but he was not afraid to put Mercedes in their place when they tried to wrestle Lewis in front of him. Right? We had times in Russia where he towed Max to a better position in qualifying so that he could start in third, I think it was, because it was a better starting position. He knew he'd get better grip in third than he would in second, and he ended up getting past Lewis in the race, I believe. There's the famous line where his engineer, or it wasn't his engineer, it was James Vowles, came on the radio and said, Valtteri, this is James. Valtteri, this is James. Abort the fastest lap attempt. And his response to him was, James, this is Valtteri. Fuck you. Right? He does have a bit of a, what's the word you used? A feisty streak to him. I think we don't see it because he realizes where he is. I think you put him in a reasonable car, and that will come back out of him. The competitive nature will come back out. Has he ruined his career to the point where he'll never get a competitive car again? Maybe.
Yeah. 10-time race winner. But ask Daniel Ricciardo how many race wins can help you when you stop being who you were.
Maybe Daniel needs 2 more.
Maybe. I do remember an interview after it was Germany 2018 when Vettel went out and Valtteri wanted to challenge for the win and they told him back off because this is for the championship because they knew Vettel had just screwed himself. And Valtteri in an interview afterwards said, it's not fair to say that I'm a number 2 driver because I think I can win if they let me. Sorry, that's me paraphrasing, but he essentially said something along those lines like, if they let me fight, I can fight.
Yeah.
It's not fair to call me number 2. And he yielded that win for Lewis. So yeah, maybe that's still in him, but I think you're right. I think it might be too late in terms of the eyes of other team principals. We'll see. I had a thought. Yuki Tsunoda is this decade's Danny Kvyat. Too good.
I don't know who to be offended for.
Good point.
Whoever he is.
Gatsby, what did I say about me making points? And you interrupting? Stupid fucking dog.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Tsunoda's too good. Not too good, but he's good enough at AlphaTauri, but not good enough to be at Red Bull. And will just cause problems for everybody if he moves to Red Bull. But by staying at AlphaTauri, he's causing us just as many problems. He's solid, like Danny Kvyat. Danny Kvyat, remember, outscored Daniel Ricciardo in 2015. But who would you rather have?
Danny Kvyat might actually have the longest career at that team of any driver they've had. I'm just trying to think back how many years he was there with a very short stint at Red Bull. But he was there for a while.
Yeah, because they kept bouncing him around. I think he would be reserve driver, come back, and he would always score points. He was always very solid. Got a few podiums when he was at Red Bull. But when it came time to let Max Verstappen in, he was gone. Didn't matter how good he was. And I see a lot of that in Tsunoda. Mm-hmm. Because everybody keeps talking about him and says, well, where does he go? Does he deserve the Red Bull seat? Not really. Isn't that enough really to say that he's a great Red Bull driver? You could give him a chance and see what happens, like Kvyat.
Yeah, I think you're right. He's not necessarily Red Bull material, and if he did end up in that seat, he would very much end up in the same way that Danny did. 3 races in, he hits the wrong person, and then you're back to the B team. But it's a tricky one because I think he's good enough to stay on the grid. But
yes.
Where does he go?
Exactly. Like, does it make sense for him to go to a Haas or Sauber? Does it make sense to him to go to Alpine? Maybe. Do any of those teams really want him, knowing that his entire career was saved because Honda forced, essentially, Red Bull to have him? Do they think he's reliable enough? Do they think if he gets another opportunity, he's going to have the early mean streaks that he had?
So that just reminded me, Aston Martin has a deal with Honda for 2026.
That's interesting.
Jordan on Formula for Success made a prediction, and he admits that this is out of nowhere. He has no inside knowledge about it. He just feels that Aston Martin will have a full Spanish driver lineup next year.
I heard that.
Which might be the case for next year. 2026, if they're looking for a driver pairing and they've got Honda as an engine partner, maybe Yuki ends up there.
Yeah, but that would imply he stays at at RB for 2025, which it's as of right now, it's looking like that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see how the rest of the season goes. Because I think if he's the kind of driver, if he's gone for a year, he's gone. I don't see why anyone would want to resurrect him. So that means he would have to be on the grid familiar and experienced if he's doing that.
Yeah, he doesn't have the mythology behind him to keep him coming back.
Yes. And I'll just say this to Jordan. That implies that Fernando stays at Aston Martin, which, as of right now, I'm leaning more towards he retires. Because it makes no sense for Red Bull or Mercedes to have Alonso. And I've been thinking about this, like the way Horner is acting and the way Wolff are acting, they're acting like two dads going through a divorce, going through a midlife crisis, trying to fight over something that their sons want. Like Horner's trying to go up to Max and be like, "Hey, you want a car?" And Max like, yeah, whatever, Dad. You don't need to get me a car, whatever. I'm probably gonna live with
got a better car.
Yeah. I'm probably gonna live with Mom anyways. And Horner being desperate and being like, "Listen, I gotta keep my son. You know what I'll do? He's always wanted to drive with Fernando Alonso. I'll get Fernando Alonso, even though that will destroy his family even more and destroy his household even more." And Max will learn nothing. Max will not grow up as a kid because he's spoiled by his dad. And Toto Wolff is sitting there too, starting to have a rocky marriage there. If you believe the rumors that he's trying to, everybody's finally asking, "Oh, does he belong as team principal in Mercedes?" That's what the rumors are saying now, or at least the articles are.
Well, he owns part of the team. I don't think anybody else really has a say in who runs it.
And I agree. And I think in terms of a figurehead, if someone who can maneuver the media, maneuver the FIA, he's the best guy for the job. Just don't rely on him for engineering.
Well, he's not an engineer.
Yes, and just hopefully he gets the right people in place eventually.
And he does, and their history has proven that. Toto is not a technical person. Toto is a financial person. So he's always had to have good technical people around him. I think a lot of the problem is a lot of those people have left.
Yes. Namely, and actually, it's good you brought this up because this was another thought I had. Ross Brawn left.
Ross Brawn left before they were anybody. Before they got to where they were, Ross Brawn was gone.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Even before 2014? I thought Brawn was still there for a bit.
I'll look it up now, but I believe he left pretty soon after the change.
Interesting. I bring that up because it also relates to Aston Martin, which is the original
2013.
Oh, okay, so before they won. That's interesting. But it's not unanimously agreed, but it is generally accepted that without Michael and Ross's work during those years, more so Ross, they would not have been the powerhouse they were in 2014. I bring this up because there's this talk too about Lawrence Stroll coaxing Adrian Newey, or trying to sign Adrian Newey, saying, "Hey, how about you come here to us?" And my thought was, it makes no sense for Newey to do that. It kind of does, I guess, with his relationship with the Aston Martin road car that you've talked about before. But it doesn't really make sense for either party. I think it's going to take too long of a mission for both, and maybe Newey might be towards the end of his career. He might kind of be on autopilot, I think, at Red Bull, and there's such a well-oiled machine that he's doing minor tweaks here and there. He may not be as sharp as he used to be, is what I'm getting at. He may not be able to start from scratch again.
He's still plenty sharp.
Oh.
I think it won't matter. The main thing to consider is him switching to Aston. Let's say it is the end. He goes to Aston for 2025. If he stays with Red Bull till the end of the year, he's probably going to have a 6-month gardening leave.
So he would have to jump at Austin in 2026.
So he would join Aston midway through the season. It doesn't make sense to do anything on the 25 car, focus on 26.
Yeah.
Which is a new regulation set, which gives him the opportunity to get in there, but it's also a new set of people to get to know,
It'll take time.
And do they give him the freedom that he needs to do what he does? Because Christian Horner has said this, and the former boss of Aston Martin before Stroll bought it said it, that Newey wants nothing to do with traditional management roles. He's no good at managing people. He just wants to do what he does. and he doesn't even know where the finance departments are. He almost simultaneously bankrupted Red Bull and Aston Martin
That's impressive.
because he doesn't compromise on what he wants.
Nor should he.
Right.
Yeah.
His record shows that you should give him what he wants. And there's rumor, just while you're talking about it, of Ferrari doing the same thing. What I saw was Ferrari's offered him a blank check, to which he's previously said, well, he would love to work with Ferrari. He doesn't want to move to Italy.
Yeah. And if you don't believe in traditional management roles, then you should not deal with Italians.
Right.
Yeah. So
That's where Adrian Newey goes to die.
yes. And even if he goes to Aston, it's going to take time because people forget there was years at Red Bull that he missed the mark, and it was, you can blame Renault all you want, but that 2014 to about 2019 era, and I know you've said before in the past that he wasn't really there at that point in time, but it's still not all the blame's on him, but some of the blame is on him during that time, and he's great. He's great because I think. And he is amazing. This is not me shitting on him. I think he's probably one of the best, if not the best engineers of all time. I was just bringing up that who does make sense at Aston Martin is Ross Brawn. An eccentric billionaire who wants to win with potentially a up-and-coming driver, which is not Stroll or Alonso. But if you look at the story of Benetton and me watching the whole Pat Simmons video that you recommended me to watch, that was the story of Benetton. So they need someone like a Michael Schumacher, someone that nobody is really familiar with, to come into that car with an eccentric billionaire and Ross Brawn. And I know who was the other guy. It was Pat Simmons and there was someone else, Rory Byrne. And if you have a good engineering block, which Braun could definitely dictate, then potentially Aston Martin makes a lot of sense for one day being a champion and one day being a destination for not Tsunoda, not Sainz, not Fernando Alonso.
Okay, but let me stop you there.
Okay.
Ross Brawn is 69 years old.
Isn't Newey like 64?
65.
Okay.
I'm not suggesting Newey has many years left in him. Where if he does go anywhere, it's the end of his career. So I think, frankly, stay with Red Bull because it's what you know and it's where you're going to be allowed to succeed and end your career on a high. My point here is we need to stop focusing on, this is going to sound mean, but the dinosaurs. Ross Brawn is great. He's responsible for Benetton. He's responsible for Ferrari, Brawn, eventually Mercedes, and now the new regulations that we have and these new cars that can fight. Let the man retire. Let him enjoy himself. Who's the next Ross Brawn? Who's the next Newey?
I wholeheartedly agree. You're absolutely right. I was just saying, in terms, if you're going to pick one, you're going to pick the guy who beat Newey a bunch of times. But this is a whole other discussion, and we might as well talk about it. We got some time. Of how you and I are millennials, right? And Ross Brawn is a boomer. And this point was brought up to me a couple days ago. The boomers never let the millennials grow up. They sat there and acted like the helicopter parents around them, like, oh, you look young. Oh, you still got a long way to go. You're still young, even though they started their lives in their 19, early 20s. And this is a good point you bring up. Why aren't they letting the next Ross Brawn and the next Adrian Newey rise to the top? Why do they keep fighting over these two or three people when they could find the next gem themselves? Yes.
And it's because of the competition and the money involved, right? They want the proven people. One thing to point out, and it's relevant to Brawn, the double diffuser that made the Brawn GP car so competitive, that pushed Braun to want to keep that team going because they genuinely knew that they had something worthwhile. Braun didn't design that.
Really?
It was a young Japanese engineer who was part of the Honda team based at BAR.
Interesting.
Right? There are hundreds of engineers in these teams. All it takes is for one very clever engineer to stand up and say, "Hey, I've got this idea." Right? Nui's done enough interviews. He's written a book. He's been around long enough for people to know how he does his thing. Now it takes someone clever enough to actually sit there and do what Nui does in a very similar way, right? Not look at what the regulation says, but look at what it doesn't say. Find the space in between the lines that allow you the flexibility to get to where you want, and look elsewhere and realize that just because you didn't have the idea doesn't mean it's not any good. Like this rumored Red Bull Zero Pod car, right? It didn't work for Mercedes. Maybe they've had correlation problems. We talked about that last week. It's rumored that the car is going to turn up in Japan with no side pods on it. Because Nui looked at it and went, "Oh, fuck, yeah, that is clever. I can see where you might get some time with that." But then took 2 years to look at it properly and design his solution for it, right? And Ross has said things very much the same as Nui has. You look for where you can get away with little bits here and there, right? Which is what made him and Pat Simmons focus so hard on these new regulations and make them restrictive in the sense that a lot of the loopholes people had been exploiting weren't there anymore, while still allowing enough flexibility that the cars weren't all the exact same. Right? So Ross Braun, Pat Simmons, Adrian Newey, Patty Lowe, these are all Patrick Head.
Rory Byrne.
Rory Byrne. These are all big names that we know, and yeah, there are younger guys out there who are actively on the grid now in these roles. But where are the really young guys that are coming up? Because those are the ones that are going to be interesting. Because when Newey got his start, he was a couple years with Leighton House, and then he was right into building good cars.
And made a lot of mistakes and they were willing to let him make a lot of mistakes. He didn't kill Senna, but there was a mistake there. Right? Like, yeah, sorry, I'm not throwing shade. I'm just saying, like, sometimes you make a mistake. Sometimes you're not perfect. Sometimes you're not the best of all time right away. And that's what I'm saying about this older generation doesn't want to... You kind of hit on it, not by accident, but like you said something like they're so focused on winning. They're so focused on maintaining what they have. They refuse to take a chance.
Yes.
And I'm saying Aston Martin is primed. And the team like Aston Martin, even an Alpine, a McLaren, is primed. You're not really challenging for the front yet. Why not take a chance? If you go back 3 positions, you're still in the league. Why not go for it? And they're not. And I think I would say the perfect storm is Aston Martin. They're in that position where they're too good to be in the back and too bad to be in the front. Why not take some big chances? I thought maybe Ross Braun, but you're right. Let's start the next generation.
Yeah, and realistically, you have to have the organization and the structure that allows you to recognize those people. Right? A lot of the engineers we hear about now are younger, right? Ross Braun's 69, Newey's 65. And we're hearing about people like Sanchez. That comes to the top of my head because he's in the news today, having just left McLaren.
Oh, yeah.
These guys are not young. They're not old, but they're in their 40s and 50s. So they've still got a decade, 2 decades left before retirement age. But where are the 20-year-old engineers? Do you have them sitting behind a CAD station just modeling aerodynamic surfaces, or do you have them actually trying to design stuff? Because realistically, the guys in the management roles aren't designing anything. but they're the ones that need to promote they need to work with the people doing the day-to-day job, right? And they need to, what the hell's the fucking word I'm looking for? It's not promote, it's
I don't know.
Foster.
Oh.
Foster that.
Nurture that relationship.
That's it. Thank you.
There you go.
Nurture that relationship within the team that brings out the creativity and allows these concepts to come through, right? Because technical people, like truly technical people, aren't 9 to 5 in the sense that if we've got a technical problem that we're looking at, we don't just turn our brain off when it's time to go home and then forget about it. I can't tell you how many times I've been, sitting on the couch watching TV, and then all of a sudden the solution to a problem pops into my head. We're constantly thinking about these things, right? So I guarantee you there's some 20, 30-year-old at one of these teams who has an idea tucked away in the corner somewhere, but hasn't brought it out because he doesn't believe the team will take to it, or he doesn't think it's good enough to bring forward to the team, right?
Well, engineers are introverts. I've told you that before on this podcast. Yeah, a lot of
exactly.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean. I just pulled an extrovert on an introvert type of thing right there. Sorry, you're making a point.
No, and that was the point, right? It's you need that environment that fosters creativity and embraces new ideas. And I think Red Bull is one of these teams. They're a younger team. They're a more innovative, let's use the term disruptor, right? And they're not this stuffy old, boys club that teams like McLaren and Williams and they've been around since the 50s and they don't want to change.
Ferrari. Yeah.
Right? So we need more people like that, and I think that's why Newey has been so successful at Red Bull, because he's been given the leeway, right? He was successful at McLaren, but we went through the story of him fucking with Ron Dennis.
Yeah.
Right? Ron wanted him to do exactly what he wanted him to do, and that's not where he was thriving.
Yeah, well, that same thing will happen probably at Aston Martin.
Yes.
So, yeah. Why hasn't Newey nurtured someone, to your point? And why hasn't someone tried to poach Newey's proteges?
They have.
Interesting.
One of them is at Mercedes, and one of them is at Aston Martin.
Oh, well, that didn't work out, I guess.
Why do you think the 23 Aston Martin looks so much like the Red Bull?
Yeah.
Mind you, that protege is not a young man either. I'm pretty sure he's in his 50s.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. Yeah. You should read The Fountainhead one day. I know it's Ayn Rand. I know it might annoy you at times. But it basically talks about what you just talked about, where one of the main characters, Peter Keating, he worries too much about what other people think about him. So he's in, like you said, that CAD drawing environment, just following the lead, trying to work his way up each step of the way, not thinking about what's potentially the best design, not challenging his brain. And then there's Howard Roark, who, instead of going to work for someone like Peter Keating did, like someone famous where he can make a lot of money, Howard goes to the bottom of the barrel, former famous architect. This is about architecture, not engineering. And is able to challenge himself every day. And he's making no money, he's poor, he's impoverished for 5-10 years. But because he did that and he challenged himself and was able to grow into himself, he became the best architect of his generation. And who's doing that now? Like, I think like that's kind of what I'm trying to get at, is that everybody's so focused on these minute details, just trying to hold ship, keep the status quo, don't want to fuck up, don't want to be even worse. Like, you see this kind of mentality right now at Mercedes. They're so worried about trying to win and not fucking up that they're fucking up and not winning. And no one's really taking a chance. No one's rolling the dice.
Yeah. And this is anecdotal. I don't have any evidence to back this, but what I'm seeing in industry is that mechanical engineering, basic fundamentals of physics, they're not sexy, they're not attractive, right?
Yes.
All the intelligent people are going to tech, which is a term I hate because what the fuck is tech?
Or OnlyFans. Yes, go on.
Tech in the sense that it's software, it's crypto, it's, whatever, but it's digital based.
Yes.
Right? And we need that. I'm not anti-digital at all. We need AI. We need all these systems that are coming in. These are areas that are worthwhile to put effort into. But we see it being a draw from the more traditional sciences. I'm a mechanical engineer by education. I've increased that with mechatronics, so electrical and mechanical together. I've dabbled in software. I don't have the patience for software. People who do software are extremely intelligent. And for the most part, they have a good grasp on physics. But very seldom are we seeing good talent come through with the level of mechanical excellence and basic fundamental physics that we used to.
There's no, like you said, it's not sexy. It's also not profitable. And I would argue, as an economist, as a mathematician, or a statistician, or whatever, there was too much economic structural damage done in 2008, and you never saw the clearing of a lot of these industries in a significant way that made it attractive for people to hire with bigger salaries or to start rebuilding. You kind of just have this flatlined status quo, like what I've been talked about with F1. It's this flatline status quo that let's just maintain what we have now. And a lot of these industries also took a lot of government subsidies in 2008 to survive. And a lot of the strings attached were don't rock the boat politically. And you've never seen this big structural change. You've never seen a fundamental, like, how do I explain this? But like you've never, they were sick, and instead of clearing out and getting better, they just stayed sick for 15 years. And I think that's just a lot of these industries, because you bring up tech. Yeah, there's a lot of quote unquote profit in tech, but a lot of it is just, I think, fake profit. It's a lot of people borrowing a lot of money, leveraging for this future that may never come. And that's where all the money's going. But a lot of the important physical, mechatronic, engineering type of industries are getting left behind because they're not politically attractive. They haven't structurally been able to change. There's no economic incentive. That's the word I'm thinking of here.
Yeah, politics aside, I think you're right about economic incentive. We see it in the automotive industry where somebody clever designs something, right? And then it gets farmed out to the lowest bidder to manufacture it. And the process of manufacturing it has so many steps. And each of those steps has several engineers involved, right? Mm-hmm. So when you look at the overall talent pool of engineering, it is absolutely massive. Everybody and anybody is an engineer. The guy at VW or Ford or BMW who designs a new innovative system, whatever it is not the same as the engineer in the manufacturing plant in China that's doing the die casting for the part. They're not comparable. But on paper, they're the same title.
That's a good point.
Right?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And depending on where you are and how you go through your education, you see different sides of it. I was lucky enough to get into R&D and development, and I've worked with some very creative, very intelligent people. But I've also had to deal with a lot of suppliers, a lot of people with masters of engineering who are just absolutely brain dead. It's like, how do you have that level of education and 20 years of work experience and not understand some of the basic core concepts of physics?
They're the Peter Keatings. They worked their way up without thinking for themselves.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm going. Like, we're in F1 now with a few really intelligent people at the top, and we're creating this kind of... I'm looking for an analogy that doesn't trigger Nick.
Just do it. I didn't mean to trigger you. I thought I was talking like government gives money out to people. Like, I wasn't trying to be like one side or the other. But yeah, go on. Just trigger me. It's fine.
There's a couple of culty analogies that come to my mind, but I'd rather not use those.
Okay.
Anyway, we're creating a herd basically of engineers who are basically waiting for the next Newey or the next Braun to tell them what to do.
Yeah, that's my stupid mealy mouth way that you just said it in much fewer words. That's exactly right. There's a bunch of people sitting there waiting to do the right thing instead of just doing the right thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So, anyway, to bring it all back, you're right. We need to take a chance on somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to give those people the opportunity to legitimately prove themselves. And just to put it out there, this might actually be what's happening at Sauber. This might be the start of something great because somebody stood up and said, wait a second, I can take weight out of those wheel nuts if we do this. Oh, fuck, it didn't work. But I've told you I'm going to take that weight out, so we're going to try this instead. Oh, fuck, that didn't work yet either. Right? Sometimes you have to fail before you get there.
Well, what's You and I Love House? Dr. House fails 4 or 5 times until he gets the right answer.
Yeah.
And when he gets the wrong answer, he learns new symptoms and new things to help him get the right answer.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I would use a fictional character written by a team of people.
Dr. House is not real?
But
oh, boy. This whole time.
sometimes I wonder if Nick is the human version of Gatsby.
Gatsby doesn't exist, does he? I've been imagining a crazy dog this entire time. Anyways. Yeah. I could even argue, and I like I said, wasn't trying to make this political, but I'll say this with the whole net zero talk. Maybe there are a lot of people stifled because they see the trajectory out of their current mindset, and they think, "What's the point in speaking up if we're just going down this way anyways?"
Counterpoint to that would be the younger generations tend to be more open to green technologies and finding alternatives. So this is actually the prime opportunity for one of the younger engineers to stand up and say, hey, how about this type of carbon fiber that's made this way instead? Oh, and by the way, it's lighter.
It's a good idea. Listen, everybody sees us as still young. You might be that young engineer.
I'm not that young.
I know we're not. It's kind of scary. I'm T-minus 6 days away from being closer to 40. Anyways, we're about an hour in. Is there anything else you want to add to that? That was a good discussion. I'm glad we had that. And it's getting us closer to one day a political, philosophical discussion where we will kill each other.
Yeah, I look forward to that.
Yeah.
Because I think I know who's coming out on top.
No, shut up. Anyways, okay, so nothing else. Then let's get on to our predictions. So we already deduced that there's a cold track, damp, cool weather. I put Verstappen number 1. Who you got for your number 1?
I'm going to go the same way.
All the evidence points that way. It's like innocent until proven guilty with him. Like, he won the last 2. This is prime for their car.
And the reason he didn't win last week's race was not his fault.
Yeah.
So.
And now he's hungry. Like, he's done his quota of non-wins for this year. He might as well win the next 21. In his eyes.
Well, the last race actually throws off his stats, so he will not be that good this year as he was last year.
Even if he wins the next 21? Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I didn't even have to get you to answer that question because I already saw it in my mind. Yep.
Well, in theory, if he wins all the next races, he will come out with an average of 1 because he wasn't qualified for that race, so it doesn't actually go into the average because there is no position for him.
Oh, okay.
So it will be better. The likelihood of him winning all those is not very high.
It's true. This is Max Verstappen, though. If anyone can, it can be him. So yeah, I guess we're both on one for him. Just lock it in. Like I think I'm just gonna tell you guys now. More than likely, every single race is going to be him number one. Maybe not Singapore. Maybe actually not Monza this year too. But we'll get to that. Who do you got for 2?
Not Checo.
Yeah,
I'm going to go with Sainz.
I should have talked first. Yeah, I was going to say
You
Sainz.
can still say Sainz.
I just wanted to say it first, but yeah, I didn't think you were going to say Sainz too. I wrote a note here. He's on his "How Dare You Drop Me" tour for the rest of the season.
It's not that clever, but okay.
Didn't say it was clever. It was a note. God damn it. Yeah, I think he's going to come too. Part of me wanted to say Norris, but the second you brought up the cold, damp track, I think he's going to fuck up, or there's a likelihood that he fucks up.
Yeah, Norris isn't necessarily bad in the rain, but he's not phenomenal.
No.
They did do really well last year in Japan.
Yeah, 2-3.
Yeah. But it was a nice day. It was actually too hot. It was hotter than usual because it was earlier in the season last year, but in the summer,
Yeah.
not in the fall.
And when did they get their upgrades, and when did they start really picking it up? Was the summer months?
The 2 upgrades happened several races before Japan.
Yeah. But I was just saying, to your point, that seems to suit the hot weather seems to suit the McLaren, because the summer months were where they picked it up. And where did what's his name, Piastri, win? Was Qatar, that sprint race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just sorry, we forgot to mention at the beginning, going back, did you hear the solution at the Formula for Success for the sprint races?
I did.
I like that last one. Give it to the juniors, the sprint races. That was a pretty cool idea. Like the sprint, nobody likes the sprint races in the main league. You might as well let the juniors just fight it out.
I would argue that they already do. That's what F2 is.
That's a good point.
Sprint race and a feature race every week. It's not a great solution. But did you notice that some of the suggestions were the exact same thing that we had suggested, more or less?
2 or 3 weeks earlier, yeah. Formula One philosophy is changing the game. I told you they listened to us, man. They just deny existence.
I'm going to start sending bills to Coulthard.
Yeah.
Consultant fees.
The only bill I'm going to send him is for Belgium 98. My number 3, I wrestled with this, but this is just a hero call. I'm going to say Piastri gets on the podium again, 3rd.
I was going to say Piastri also.
Oh, nice. Yeah, so we're on the same page. I think he's coming into his own. And I think you nailed it a couple weeks ago when you said he could have been Weber when he followed team orders. Where was it? It was in Saudi Arabia. He followed team orders.
Australia.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. But I think he's going to be hungry, and I think he's going to want to prove himself. And he came 3rd last year. Who says he doesn't come 3rd again this year?
Yeah. I don't have anything to add to that. I think it's spot on.
Yeah. Okay, so who do you got for?
I'm going to say Leclerc. Because I think Sainz has developed a good car.
Ah, nice. Nicely said. Yeah. Do you have any more proof? Did you do any more research on that to prove? This is something you don't have to answer
No,
now.
I haven't.
Yeah, but I think there is something to that. And so we're just going to keep believing it. Yeah. His father, how much did he help with developing Audi in Le Mans and the car and stuff like that?
His senior never raced Le Mans, as far as I know.
Oh, then what was it?
World Rally.
Well, that's what it was.
And Dakar.
Yeah. Whoops.
There's a difference there because you're not developing cars per se. Like, yeah, he's out testing, he's giving feedback, but the chassis is fixed,
Ah,
right?
okay.
the thing with World Rally Championship is that they have to be road-going cars that then get modified, right? So there's less work from a development side like we're used to in F1, and more so on the driver making the best of what they have in very treacherous conditions.
As F1 philosophy listeners know, I just make bold claims in the hopes that they're right, not doing any research of my own. This was one of those swing and misses. So,
Or, you can say it,
I don't make mistakes, I make prophecies that immediately turn out to be wrong.
thank you, Gatsby. Thank you for being on my team for once. Okay, you say Leclerc 4. I'm not done with Perez. I just don't think he's going to get on the podium. And I think Perez is 4.
okay,
He finished second 2 years ago, and he had a tough time last year. This is a tough argument I'm going to make because I think you're right. He's probably not going to be anywhere near the top 5 after having such a bad last year. And I was thinking about today, he's way behind on his goals from last year. He's already way behind in points and goals, and where he was, he's already fallen apart. So he might be too far gone to ever correct his position there. I'm saying this. I'm not saying you saying this.
we're 3 races into a 24-race season.
I'm just saying he's already like 18 points behind where he was last year. I'm just saying. But I still have faith in him. That's why I'm going to put him 4.
Okay,
Just say it.
I'm not putting him in my top 5 because he's part of my
Oh, okay.
my out there prediction.
Okay, that's fair. All right. 5 is Leclerc for me. I'm done standing up for the Mercedes. I learned my lesson last week, or last race. So, fuck you, George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. You really let me down. And if their car is slow, it's not going to be suited at this track. So,
I'm going to put Hamilton as 5
wow.
because I think he's annoyed at the issue last week, and he's going to come back with proper motivation to do something. But their car is slow, so he's not going to get any higher than 5th.
You see, I think motivation is gone for the year. I already said that before. I just don't see him giving a shit. And if the car doesn't come out flying, I don't think he's going to have a good weekend. And this is not primed for them right now. So that's a good point. That's a good, bold take. And I'm not like going to argue against it. I'm just saying, I don't know.
You don't agree?
I
And
don't
that's
agree.
Fine.
Yeah.
P10?
P10. Okay. And this is going to relate to my hot take. Pierre Gasly's P10.
So you're hoping that 10 people just straight up DNF?
They're apparently lighter. They've already brought in upgrades. They're apparently lighter. So if they're lighter, they're basically what they were last year, which was 9th and 10th. So, Gasly and Ocon.
I'm not tracking your logic, but okay.
Well, I'm just saying, if the problem was they were overweight coming into this year, and that's why they've been so slow, apparently they're lighter coming into this weekend.
Yeah, but is lighter 2 grams or is it 10 kilos?
Okay, well, yeah, good point. I didn't bother to ask that question.
And weight was one problem. The car is genuinely terrible to drive.
It wasn't great to drive last year.
Yeah, it apparently went backwards.
Oof. I'm sticking with it. Gasly P10.
All right. I'm not going to say Yuki because I think Yuki is actually going to pull it out of the bag and finish higher than 10th.
Wow.
Danny's going to be 18th.
Oof. He's going to pull a Tio Pourchaire.
Yeah. For those of you that don't follow Super Formula, Teo Pourchaire absolutely bombed on his Super Formula debut.
Better than Oscar Piastri, according to him.
Yeah. Outperformed by Ayuma Iwasa, who is making his F1 testing debut with Red Bull this weekend, or with V-Carb, I think.
And he will go precisely nowhere. Yeah, actually, he's taking Danny's FP1.
Oh, so Danny's definitely an 18th.
Oh, shit.
So who is 10? It's a good question.
Don't say the Haas. Don't say the Haas. Not this week.
Fuck, I wasn't going to, but now you raise a good point.
But no, they've never done good at Japan.
But the car's better.
I don't know if it is.
I'm going for it. Hulkenberg.
Okay. It's about around where he's going to be all year.
Yep.
Anywhere between 9th and 14th.
And frankly, that's what they need.
Yeah. I think it's not necessarily because of him or the car. I think it's because, like I said, 2 Saubers, 2 Alpines, and Logan are the back almost every race.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just giving the Alpines a chance this week, and if they fuck me, I'm done with them. But yeah, that's not necessarily Hulkenberg or them. I just want to bring up one point that I forgot to bring up earlier. You nailed your statistics on Yuki Tsunoda. He's finishing anywhere from 8th or 9th to 13th every race.
This is not... Nobody should be surprised. Because this is what the data says.
Yeah, I know. I'm not exactly shocked. I'm just saying, good job.
This is not me. I did nothing here but look at data. Right? This is what I mean about fundamental physics and basics of science. When you let the numbers do what they do, you don't need to guess.
That's a good point. I still like guessing. What's your hot take of the week? I can't wait to hear this.
I watched the Japanese Grand Prix from last year today. I think Perez is going to have a worse weekend than he did last year.
Wow. So where did he finish last year?
He did not. Oh. He had first lap contact, which I believe he received a penalty for. He then went in, got a nose change, fell back through the field, obviously, behind the safety car. Came out, attempted to pass attempted to pass Magnussen. Damaged Magnussen's car pretty bad. Got another penalty. Went back in for a new nose. Went back in for a new nose before he got the penalty. Came out. The car didn't feel right, so they retired the car.
Oh, I remember this race. He came out for like one lap not to get an engine penalty or something.
Right. So when they gave him the penalty right before he retired, and then it was this nonsense where they retired the car, he was out of the car, and then all of a sudden he's coming back into the garage, and they're frantically working on the car, and then he's in it, the car is on, but it's not going anywhere, and he's like 19 laps down.
I remember that.
And he goes out, he runs 2 laps, he does a pit stop, takes the penalty, and then they retire the car.
That's amazing.
They should have given him a fucking grid drop anyway for the next race, just out of spite.
Just for being annoying to everybody, yeah.
But I'm sure the reason that happened, and I'm sure the reason he sat in the car and waited, was because they were talking to the FIA and making sure that they could do that and not get another penalty, right? Those are the types of loopholes that need to be closed. Like, that's fucking nonsense.
Yeah, if you retire the car, you're done. You can't come back, yeah.
Yeah. This is not Le Mans, right? Where you can put the car in the garage and change just about anything and get back an hour after you went into the garage being 20 laps down and still genuinely be competitive in the race because everybody is doing shit like that, right? This is not that. This is 2 hours max realistically of racing, and if you're off track for more than 3 seconds, you're out of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Not 3 seconds, but like, we'll say 5 laps. 5 laps should be a cutoff, yeah.
With the exception of Brazil last year, you never see anybody down that much come back in any competitive way.
Yeah.
Right. And Brazil last year, we're talking about the red flag and Danny and
Oscar, yeah, that was bullshit.
Coming back in a minute and a half or something like that down.
No, I think it was actually 2 laps, and they made it 1 lap by the end, which was pretty impressive.
Less than a lap. I think Danny was like 40 seconds.
Oh, yeah, you're right, yeah.
So, anyway, it's a rare exception that, we've seen it with Sauber this season. They spend 30 seconds in the pits, and then they're pinned to the back of the grid.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, actually, to your point, to what you said, the FIA did say, like, why are you letting him back out? You might as well have retired the car. It might be unsafe. They almost gave them a penalty. Like, because they weren't sure if the wheel was in place properly. I think there was talk about that.
Oh, the Saubers. Okay.
Yeah, the Saubers, yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So your big prediction is Perez has an even worse race, so then he probably has a Bottas like Hungary where he knocks out 5 cars, or a Coulthard like Belgium in 98 where he knocks out 17 cars. One of the two.
So let's add some criteria to it just so that there's no arguing about it later. So what makes a worse race than last year? More penalties? So at least 3 penalties.
Okay, so we got 2 penalties, yeah.
So he's going after Ocon territory there.
And then a grid drop for China.
Okay.
Or so if he has either a grid drop for China or more penalties than last year. You want to say or? Yeah, I'm good with or.
Massive injury. What are other options?
Car pileup. If he takes out 6 cars, that's pretty terrible. Like Bottas.
All right. And are we saying any of those, all of those, any combination of them, 2 of 4, 3 of 4?
That's 4 of them. It's or for all. If any of those happen, you're right. So it's like these are big things. These are things that happen rarely, like a big car pileup or 3 penalties or a grid drop. I'll allow a grid drop, which is more common these days, but that is worse than last year. He avoided the grid drop. My hot take goes with my P10 prediction. It's even worse than what you're thinking. It's both Alpines in the top 10, specifically Ocon and Gasly 9-10. If they're ever going to do it, it's going to be this weekend.
Do you want to put in 9-10 or do you want to just leave it in the top 10?
And yeah, both in the top 10 then. We'll say both in the top 10. But that's my guess. My instinct is to say Ocon 9, Gasly 10. I can't imagine any higher than that.
You heard it here. Nick wants them 1-2.
If that happens, I'll hang dong on the next podcast, okay? Like,
why?
I'm just saying.
Me, you, and Gatsby.
Gatsby will hang dong the next podcast then.
He's probably hanging dong right now. We just can't see him.
Jesus, Gatsby. Put some pants on, you. All right.
Fantastic development this is.
Yeah, you would like that, Gatsby, you sicko. God, if only people knew. All right. I don't really have much else to add, to be completely honest with you. And for once, we're under an hour and a half.
Well, that's not right. That's not right at all.
You're right. Do we have another hour and a half left in us?
I mean, probably, but should we?
I don't know. I think this is it. Like, it's not that Japan's boring. I think it's one of the most exciting races. I just don't think there's much else to say for this week. Actually, I just want to talk about one more thing with you. The McLaren losing 2 engineers in 1 week. What's going on there?
I don't know. They didn't lose 2 engineers. They lost an engineer and their head of young driver development.
Okay.
The engineer thing is weird. So Sanchez leaving. Sanchez just joined from Ferrari. 3 months. It's very unceremonious. It was a cold press release. He decided to leave. That's not their wording, but basically he's not here anymore. Which makes me think he got canned.
Something inappropriate in the office, maybe like said the wrong thing to somebody.
Maybe he told Zach Brown to go fuck himself, or he didn't get along with Andrea Stella. Whatever it is, they hired him because he thought he was worthwhile to hire, obviously.
Yeah.
And then very quickly went, holy fuck, this isn't working. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
It's triggered a bit of a shuffle. So different people doing different things. Not necessarily a bad thing. Their head of driver development is interesting because he put out his own statement which suggested he was happy with where the progress was and he left. But at the same time, I don't know that it was that way. Just the wording around it's been bizarre. I don't think it has any real impact. Obviously, the driver development, they've got their fleet of young drivers, none of which I think are very promising, frankly.
I was going to say Pato Award, Colton Hurt.
Colton Hurt is not part of them.
Oh, okay.
I forget who they are, who the other ones are, but there's more than I had anticipated. Bianca Bustamante is one of them for W Academy. She was really hyped up at the beginning, but the first race they had, she was absolutely abysmal.
It's early. It's early. I'm just going to use your trope. It's early.
Yeah, but they don't have 24 races.
How many
They've
do
got
they?
like 7.
Oh, okay.
I think they've got 6 or 7 weekends, but it's 3 races a weekend. So, yeah, it was not good times, but that doesn't really mean much. So, ultimately, the driver program doesn't affect the F1 team directly this year, obviously. The Sanchez thing is interesting. Who knows? Maybe he's responsible for their slow start to this season, where they could have had more. Maybe not. Maybe he's just a giant asshole that they didn't get along with. We don't know.
That sounds more likely, but also I'll say Ferrari came out a lot better than expected. Maybe Sanchez was Ferrari was addition by subtraction by getting rid of Sanchez, and maybe McLaren's realizing that.
Quite possible.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess there's no panic there, but like, it's just interesting 3 months in that you would drop someone you highly rated and poached from Ferrari, right?
Mm-hmm. Another shout out to F1 Beyond the Grid. I listened yesterday to Io Komatsu.
I was going to listen to that. It was good.
It's good, yeah. It's really opens up the detail into who he is and why he's there, and a lot of information that I don't think most of us know because he hasn't been a huge name. He's been around for a long time, but none of us really knew much about him.
Mm-hmm. Grosjean did, and Grosjean talked highly of him. Yeah,
they're very good friends. So it is a good listen. It is a very technical discussion, but he's a cool dude.
Yeah, it makes sense if the problems you had stem from a guy who was a starfucker, then the quietest guy in the world would improve you, theoretically speaking, right? Like, quiet technical guy, because Steiner was non-technical and loud, and Komatsu's quiet and technical.
The one thing I'll say, let's see if you see the same thing, and go into it openly. Don't listen for it, but just, he's Japanese, so obviously his accent is there, right? He went to England for university, and learned to speak English shortly before going to university. So he's got quite an accent. But if you listen closely, I want you to see if you hear the same thing that I heard. And we'll save that maybe till next week. But
is he like stereotypical old-fashioned Japanese where he has like a female translator that he hits from time to time, like, and then they're
no,
we haven't done.
I'm going to stop you there.
We haven't done a racism since the first episode. Like, we're due, Sean.
No, it has to do with the way your favorite person talks.
Oh, so he has like Steinerisms. Oh, okay, well now
see if you can point them out.
Okay.
But it was interesting hearing his accent, speaking in English with, like you said, Steinerisms thrown in there.
Okay.
So he very clearly spent a lot of time around Steiner.
Like how Yuki learned English from the engineers, according to Drive to Survive. That's why he's rough. So Komatsu learned English from Steiner. And
from English engineers in the middle of buttfuck nowhere. So yeah.
We'd all be better people if we learned English that way.
Would we?
No. And on that note, I promise everybody, next week we'll have a racism. We're due.
I don't know that we should be striving for racism.
Yeah, that's the goddamn joke. You're starting to turn into Gatsby now.
That lunatic!
Yeah, you side with your dad. and not me. Gatsby, I will beat you on camera. Anyways, Formula1_philosophy at Instagram, Formula1 Philosophy at YouTube, and please, people, join the F1 Philosophy Fantasy League at f1philosophypod@gmail.com. If Gatsby wins, the world is a worse place.
Yes.
We can't let that happen. All right, we'll be back next week to talk about what we saw in Japan. It's going to be a great race. I'm staying up to watch it. I'll even stay up to watch qualifying. It's going to be fun. 2 a.m. our time.
Yeah, I'm not staying up for that.
Yeah, you can try, but you won't.
Well, it'll be worse than what happened with Australia.
Yeah. Thank God you were able to get it together, because I might have spoiled that race for you heavily.
Yeah, I don't think we talked about that.
Do you want to tell everybody quickly before we close up?
Yeah, so we're old, and it's hard to stay up.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So Nick and I both decided that we were going to watch it because it was on at 12.
Yep. 12 o'clock our time.
So I settled in 10 o'clock and figured, okay, I got 2 hours. I'll put on F2 and then F3. That'll kill 2 hours, no problem. And I dozed off at the end of the F2 race and woke up to Nick texting me, did you make it? And me going, yep, yeah, I made it. And I go to put on the race and realize that it's 33 laps in and it's an hour after 1 o'clock in the morning.
And it's even worse than that. I texted you two, Mercedes are dead to me, because at this point, Russell was nowhere near second and Hamilton was out. And thank God I didn't elaborate further on that.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, if you tried that this week, it would be even worse.
So no, I'll just watch it at 6 o'clock in the morning when the kids wake
Like
up.
a ferried up a drain pipe.
Fuck you too, Gatsby.
What a dick. You sure you still want him producing this show? Doesn't do his job.
I never did.
Oh. You know, the other day I caught him licking himself.
He's a dog.
That
It'd be weirder if you caught me licking myself.
This podcast will be the first to know if that happens. Good night, everybody.
Like a ferried up a drain pipe.
Yeah, we get it, Gatsby. We get it. Good night.